Structure Fishing. I'm Jim Shell. This is the Structure Fishing Workshop, Part 3, Weather and Water. Before we get started though, let's recap the basic guidelines from the earlier workshop. We said that the home of the fish is deep water. When the fish is in this deep water sanctuary, he is normally so dormant, inactive, non-chasing, he's pretty hard, if not near impossible to catch. But the fish doesn't stay deep, dormant, inactive all the time. He becomes active once or twice a day and may move towards the shallows. We're saved again because he just doesn't move in a haphazard direction. He follows the features of the bottom that we call structure, breaks, and break lines. How far the fish move on structure and how long he stays is controlled by the weather and water conditions present at that time. So with that, let's start this workshop talking about weather. Weather is one of the excuses that is so used by fishermen. You hear fishermen all the time use weather as an excuse for not catching fish. They'll say, well, it was too windy today, it was too warm today, it was too hot, it was too cold, it was too calm, it was too sunny. Weather is so often used as an excuse for not catching fish. But we got to come up with a starting point when we talk about weather, and that's going to be a cold front. Buck Perry was the first one to talk about how weather affected fishing, specifically a cold front. And a lot of anglers now associate a cold front with bad fishing, but many anglers really don't know why a cold front means bad fishing. We're going to explain that to you. So this is what a cold front looks like on a weather map. I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's a blue, usually the symbol is a blue line like that with triangles. And most weather systems in the United States typically move west to east. And on the prefrontal side of the cold front, you usually have warmer temperatures, cloud cover or building cloud cover, and rain and storms as you get right on the edge of that cold front. On the back side of the cold front, you're typically going to have much drier air, cooler air, and usually it's going to be pretty windy. The bigger difference you have in temperature between these two air masses, the greater chance you have of weather or severe weather on that cold front. Now here's another weather map that I'm sure many of us have seen. And as you can see, right along that edge of the cold front there, you can see some strong storms. And a cold front means you've got, like I say, you've got two air masses and they meet in the middle that separates the two air masses is the cold front. The greater the temperature difference between these two air masses, the stronger the storms are going to be. And once again, prefrontal conditions, before the cold front, you're going to have a lot more cloud cover, more humidity, warmer temperatures. And when that cold front goes through, it's usually going to clear out the sky. You'll have a bluebird sky. It'll be cooler out, and it'll usually be windy out. So we got a Buck Says here. So write this down. Buck says, the lighter or brighter it is, the tougher the fishing will be. The darker the conditions, the better it will be. So on that statement right there, we said the lighter or brighter it is, the tougher fishing will be. That's after the front. The skies are going to clear up. It's going to be lighter out. That's why you've got tougher fishing after the cold front. Prior to the front, as Buck says here, the darker the condition, the better it will be. So prefrontal conditions, you're going to have cloud cover and perhaps rain and storms, but those prefrontal conditions are going to be darker conditions, meaning typically better fishing. As Buck says here, prefrontal conditions will give good fish movements. Postfrontal conditions will give bad or little fish movements. So let's take a look back at our cold front here. So before the front, you're going to have much better conditions, darker conditions with that cloud cover. After the front, post-frontal, you're going to have typically clearer skies, if not a washed out sky, and cooler temperatures and dry air, no humidity, or very low humidity. Now this is typically how it's going to look after a cold front. You'll have a washed out sky And when you can see the moon, especially the craters and all the details in the moon, you've got a very tough weather condition for fishing. That means that you've got very dry air in the atmosphere. You've got, which creates maximum light penetration. The more humidity you've got up in the upper atmosphere, then you'll start building clouds, and then you're going to have less light penetration. But when you can see the moon like this, and you can see, especially sometimes you can look up there and see the craters, you've got a tough weather condition. You've got maximum light penetration. When you see these jets flying really high in the sky, I mean, a lot of times they're hard to notice, but when you see a jet like that with no contrail, and the contrail is short for a condensation trail. When there's no contrail, that means that you've got dry air, and that humidity gets absorbed, and you don't have any moisture in the upper atmosphere. That contrail gets absorbed right away. So when you see an airplane up high like that with no contrail, you got a tough weather condition. Here's another picture where you've got a pretty short contrail up there. Bit of a tough weather condition. The longer the contrail, sometimes you'll see them, they'll get wide and they'll just stay up there and it'll be a cloud basically, or just gradually build and get wider and wider. That means you've got a lot more humidity up there. You got less light, not as much light penetration. All right, now we're going to start a typical fishing day and show you how the weather affects fish movements. You can see here we've got a structure that we're going to use as an example here. Let's take a quick look and see what we have here. We have a 5-foot weed line. We have a break line at 10 feet. We have a stump at 15 feet, which is a break. We have another break line at 20 feet. Then we have the last break line, which is a drop off at 35 feet. We typically said that the home of the fish, his sanctuary, will typically be 30 to 35 feet under normal weather and water conditions. When you're talking about a cold front, that sanctuary will be a little bit deeper. So day one after the cold front, we have maximum light penetration. The fish are going to be in their cold front sanctuary, which is going to be below 35 feet of water. As you can see here, the school of fish is in that deep water cold front sanctuary. You might have a couple of fish hanging around that 35-foot drop-off. First day after the cold front, you're going to have very short movements, if any movements at all. If the fish do become active and move, it may be just for about 5 minutes, maybe 10 at the most, depending on the water, which we'll go over in a bit. But say 5 to 10 minute activity period, if that, it's going to be deep, very short, before they drop back down to that deep water sanctuary. Typically the first day after a cold front, you'll see these puffy clouds. And they are usually moving pretty fast across the sky. When you see those clouds, those are those post-frontal cold front clouds. And they'll last for about a half a day, and then those will go away, and then you have a bluebird sky. Nickname for these clouds is typically cold front clouds. You see them, you know you got a tough condition. All right, so we've got day two after the cold front. Let's take a look and see what the fish are doing. The fish are still in their deep cold water cold front sanctuary, and you got a couple of fish that may move to the 35-foot break line, and a couple maybe up to the 20-foot break line. We'll say it's summertime and there's two movements. The fish might get active in the morning, and this movement's going to be very brief, 5-10 minutes at the most, before they drop back down again. They'll move in the morning, say 9 o'clock, for that 5 to 10 minute period, and then late afternoon, early evening, there'll be another activity period that will only last about 5-10 minutes at the most before they drop back down again on the second day. Now we go outside on day 3, and the contrails you can see on that plane are getting a little bit longer. You may see a few clouds starting to build. Temperature may rise a little bit. The winds are probably more likely going to die down. And day 3 is typically an average weather condition. The fish now on day 3 are going to move back to their normal sanctuary depth, which is going to be around 35 feet of water. Now the fish in the morning will move. You'll get some fish moving to the 20-foot break line and the 15-foot stump. This movement on day 3 in the morning may last 10 to 15 minutes, and then in the late afternoon, early evening, they may move again for another 10 to 15 minutes on this day 3. Now we wake up on day 4 after the cold front, and now look at that contrail from that airplane. Now they're getting longer, they're staying in the sky much longer. They're staying up there for good, maybe 15 minutes to a half an hour. You're starting to see some high clouds starting to form. You got conditions starting to build on us now. Temperature's rising a little bit. It's getting more stable weather conditions. Winds really calmed down. It's a pretty nice day out. Let's take a look and see what the fish are doing on day 4. And there's some of the clouds are starting to build a little bit more. Now on day 4, in the morning, the fish become active. They leave their deep water sanctuary, the school of fish, and they move to the 20-foot break line, with some fish at the 15-foot stump and a couple of stragglers going up to the 10-foot break line. When the fish move on this day 4 in the morning, this movement activity period may last 10 to 15 minutes in the morning. Then they'll move back down, and then a second activity period may happen late afternoon, early evening, and its conditions are still stable, still getting better. This movement in the evening may even last a little bit longer than the morning movement. It could be 20 minutes that the fish stay active before they move back down again. You're starting to have some pretty good fishing now. Now you wake up day 5, you got another layer of clouds moving in. It's getting a little bit warmer out. You got more humidity in the air. You've got less light penetration now. Let's see what the fish are doing on day 5 after the front. Wow, they're doing great now. The entire school of fish, when they become active and move, the entire school now moves all the way up to the 15-foot stump, with some fish going to the 10-foot break line and a couple of fish even going as far as the 5-foot break line. The fish move in the morning on this day 5, and this activity period could last for about 25 minutes in the morning, 25 to 30 minutes in the morning, before they drop back off to their deep water sanctuary. And now the afternoon, day 5 rolls on. It's early evening. The fish become active and they move again. The weather's still improving. Maybe a little bit more cloud cover moved in. Now the fish on day 5, they'll leave their deep water sanctuary. They'll move back to that 15-foot stump again. A few more fish showing up at the 10-foot break line. A few more stragglers going to the 5-foot weed line again. But this movement activity period now may last 25, 30 minutes that the fish are active like this. Fishing's good. And then they'll move back down to their deep water sanctuary. Boy, we wake up on day 6. We got contrails in the sky. They're staying up there all day. They're thick. It's clouds. Another layer of clouds is moving in. A little bit warmer out. The forecast later in the day says we're supposed to get rain mid-evening that day. And let's go out there in the morning on day 6. Boy, now you've got the entire school of adult fish leaving their deep water sanctuary in the morning, migrating on structure, and the whole school is going all the way to the 10-foot break line. And you've got fish at the 5-foot weed line, and you got smaller fish going scattered back into the weeds. This is typically when the shoreline fisherman, or I should say the guy beating the banks, starts catching some fish. And the fish become active. They move in the morning, and this school may stay at this 10-foot break line for 35, 40 minutes. That movement activity period will last. Then they'll drop back down to their deep water sanctuary, and you might get straggler fish staying, at the 10-foot break line and the 15-foot stump throughout the day. And then late afternoon, early evening, boy, you got more clouds moving in. It's forecast to rain in a couple more hours. The fish become active again in the evening, and they move. This activity period could be 35, 40 minutes that they're up on that 10-foot break line again, the entire school. You've got a great fishing day. The fish are active. They're staying up there longer. And then they drop back down. We wake up on day 7, and day 7 is Saturday most of the time, the weekend for most of us. We wake up on day 7, and what do we see? a bluebird sky like this. It rained last night. We wake up, rain's over. It dropped about 10 degrees out. It's wind picked up. You lost all our humidity. Now, most of us that don't know much about weather conditions and how it affects fish would think, wow, wow, what a beautiful day to go fishing. No, this is the first day after the front. It's a bad day to go fishing. You have maximum light penetration now. The fish don't like that. The more light condition you have, the tougher fishing is going to be. So day one after the cold front, what happens to the fish? Bam, they drop back down. They don't only drop to their deep water sanctuary, they drop to their cold front sanctuary, which is usually deeper. They're well past the 35-foot break line again. You might have a couple straggler fish hanging at the 20-foot break line for a while, but they'll eventually drop down to the 35-foot drop off and below. All right, now all major game species of fish are affected by a cold front. Some are affected more than others. So let's take a look and see which fish start moving, are the first fish to start moving after a cold front. The fish that are least effective or start moving first would be your northerns, your walleyes, and muskies. You'll see them moving typically before the bass do. After the walleyes, northern muskies, you'll see white bass, striped bass, they're somewhere in the middle, and then smallmouth bass. And the fish that is most effective by a cold front is the largemouth bass. That's why in the basic movements of fish, we said we're going to use the largemouth bass as our study fish, because he is the one that is affected the most by weather and water conditions. Now, we can't select the weather. You know, most of us are forced to fish on the weekends, and a lot of us, most of the time, that means a cold front condition. So what we can do if we're fishing underneath a bad cold front is maybe target a species or a lake that has a good population of northern pike, walleye, or even muskies. Not saying we can't fish for bass, but if we have to fish for bass that day, we just know he's going to be affected more than the other species. And if we're fishing for bass, we're going to have to be more accurate in our presentation of lures, in our interpretation, because he is affected the most. Not saying we can't catch him. You can't catch him, but he's going to be harder to catch, and we got to be more precise in our presentation of lures, which we'll talk about later. All right, that wraps up weather. We'll take a short break, and then we're going to continue this part 3 workshop with water conditions.